something amazing has happened, and Roger Ver is going to reveal for the first time anywhere on the planet what is going on. He's going to do it here in jet-lag state today. Bless his heart. He's here from Japan, and afterwards he's going to go get a much-needed nap. But for right now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you a man who stands for what is right with the world, the opportunities that we have, both with technology, but grounded in the principles of liberty and freedom. Join me in giving a rousing welcome to Roger Ver.
Thank you so much, Terry. Hi, everyone. You thought you were going to hear about Bitcoin Cash. You're going to hear about something that's probably as exciting or maybe even more exciting than Bitcoin Cash at the moment, and wasn't possible before the invention of Bitcoin. So you're going to hear about freesociety.com, the next step after Bitcoin. So I think we're at the right conference to announce this sort of thing. Thank you. So to sum it up, we are purchasing sovereign land from a government to create the world's first libertarian country. So as I'm sure a lot of people in this room are aware, that lots of people have made a lot of money thanks to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And a big giant chunk of those people are hardcore libertarian, voluntarists, free market advocates. So what's the next step? Here it is. All right, so who are we? Myself and my good buddy Olivier. We came together and we've been working on this for a while. Olivier was a very, very early Bitcoin adopter, even earlier than myself. He's been working on this sort of thing for the last 10 years. He's a lifelong libertarian. I'm Roger Ver. I'm the first investor in the entire Bitcoin ecosystem for Bitcoin startups and that sort of thing. I'm also a voluntarist. For people that don't know what a voluntarist is, it's basically somebody who thinks that all human interactions should be on a voluntary basis or not at all. And the difference between a voluntary interaction and a coerced interaction is the difference between working for a living or being a slave. It's the difference between making love or being raped. And so all throughout society and all your interactions with people in your day-to-day life, everybody deals with everybody on a voluntary basis, with a few exceptions: murderers, rapists, thieves, and governments. So if we all know that murderers, rapists, and thieves are bad people for dealing with each other on coercive, non-voluntary means, what does that make you think about governments? So anyhow, in history, there's been other people that have tried to do things. So there was the Republic of Minavera. I probably didn't pronounce that very well. But it was basically a sand atoll out in the middle of the Pacific. And a very, very wealthy group of people, I think it was in the late 70s, went out there and started dredging up more sand. And they tried to build their own island out in the middle of the Pacific. And they wanted to start their own, libertarian-ish, geographic piece of the world there. And what happened, as soon as they had spent a whole bunch of money dredging up this sand atoll and turning it into an island, the neighboring, local coercive, violent thugs showed up from the government of Tonga, I believe, and said, "Oh, thank you for dredging up this land for us. It's ours now." And they used a bunch of guns and kicked them out of there. Sealand is another very, very interesting story. It was a gun turret that was abandoned off the coast of the UK after World War II, and some people have set up a data center out there, and they kind of say that it's their own thing. Anyhow, seasteading is also very interesting. And Liberland is another project between Croatia and Serbia, where both countries claim this land doesn't belong to us. The reason they're claiming that land doesn't belong to either of those countries is because if they lay claim to that land, they lose claim to an even bigger piece of land that both countries want a lot more. But that's another fantastic project that I'm a big fan of and a supporter of as well. And anything that's peaceful, that's my motto. Anybody should be allowed to do absolutely anything that's peaceful. So throughout the world, if you can raise enough money, why not just ask? Hey, there's a lot of governments out there with a bunch of debt and poverty and natural disasters. Just ask them, hey, if we give you a whole giant pile of money, how about you give us some land? And that's exactly what we've done. And we've been really, really surprised by just how much reception there's been from these governments. So we can help them clear their national debt. We can help pretty much everybody that's at this conference realizes that the more economic freedom a place has, the more financial prosperity they have. If you look at that's right. So, if you look around the world, the places with the most economic freedom have the most material wealth. And I'm pretty sure that's going to happen in short order with our economic free zone. So, and of course, there's tremendous employment opportunities there because of this. And we already have more than $100 million of private capital committed to this. And that's just the start, right? To make it clear, the lawyers have told me very, very carefully that this is not an ICO. So we are not having an ICO. I just want to make that clear. But we're exploring very carefully what the appropriate ways to allow the general public to participate in this as well. So the $100 million is from people, hardcore libertarians that have made some money in the cryptocurrency space that want to see a free society within our lifetime. So we have a bit of selection criteria, right? We want to find a place that's close to existing economic powerhouses, needs to be accessible by water. We need it to be in a stable government conflict-free area. We don't want to build it where there's a war zone going on already. We need to have a big enough piece of land where we can really do this. And we need the existing country that we're going to buy land from has to have a constitution that allows for this sort of thing. So actually we called up some governments already. We've been talking to a number of governments already, and we were stunned by just how interested and enthusiastic they were. They're like, you're going to give us a bunch of money for land we're not particularly using already at the moment? So it was really, really a pleasant surprise just how interested they've been. And of course, small governments are easier to deal with than big giant governments, and we'll be naming some names in the future, but not quite yet today. And of course, the timing is right? People all across the world are realizing that government doesn't work. A big influencing book in my own life was Harry Brown's Why Government Doesn't Work. And I read that book and it started to open my eyes. I guess government doesn't work. And the whole world is becoming decentralized right before our eyes. And we're all here at this conference, we know that. But the rest of the world is starting to realize that as well. And governments are, they're not only going in the opposite direction, they've been in the opposite direction since day one. They're a coercive institution that deal with other individuals by violence or threats of violence. And for any sane person, you should realize that dealing with other adults through violence or threats of violence, that's not the right way to live your life. So governments and all forms of violence, we're going to do away with those as much as we possibly can. So, and basically, we need to set the right example for the rest of the world, right? There's not going to be any government of any kind. All the basic rules will be agreed upon up front. So we're going to buy this land, and we're going to set the rules of the game plan there. And if anybody's read David Friedman's The Machinery of Freedom, there's a bunch of fantastic examples of how this could potentially work. But at the end of the day, the free market's going to be what figures it out. So the law and the Constitution are going to be part of the actual land deed for this. So think of it kind of like a private home ownership association. You lay out the ground rules from day one, and that's the playing rules. And it's going to be, again, based on the ideas of voluntarism and the non-aggression principle. Competing private protection agencies will deal with protection, right? Think about it. If a police car pulls up behind you while you're driving, do you feel more or less safe? If you're driving down the road and a private security guard that patrols the local shopping mall pulls up behind you, do you feel more or less safe? Probably about the same. But that should tell you which one of those agencies is doing a better job of making you feel safe and secure in your belongings. And we'll negotiate some additional protection from external threats from the country that sells us the land originally. The United Nations, I'm sure everybody here is probably not that big of a fan of the United Nations. We're not going to join. So of course, no plans to join, right? It would require a central authority. This land isn't going to have a central authority. We're all about decentralization. We're going to buy some land. There's not going to be a central authority. And not dealing with the UN avoids a lot of other issues. So I'm sure you're all wondering about passports. That would require a central authority. It would require UN membership, right? Just use your existing passport. Kids can automatically get the citizenship from their parents. The private market's going to come up with way better alternatives than passports, right? We can have ID systems in the blockchain. A lot of people probably don't realize it because everybody here was born after World War I, but before World War I, you didn't need a passport. You just showed up wherever the heck you wanted to go, and that was it. There was nobody there waiting at the border saying, your papers, please. And that's how it's going to be in our free society as well. So limitations, right? We need to minimize our attack surface. No nuclear weapons. Wikipedia has a great example of why nuclear weapons are a violation of the non-aggression principle, basically because they can't be used for any defensive purpose ever, and it's a threat to everybody around you. You can't export weapons and drugs, mainly because the other governments around you are going to be mad about that, and they probably won't sell us the land, so that'll be part of the land title. We'll have some sort of age of consent, and we won't be allowing people to secede. That'll be built into the original land title that they've agreed to when they purchased the land. So, what's next? We're exploring ways for the public and the interested parties to participate. Again, this is not an ICO. We welcome all libertarians, constitutional experts, free thinkers to join us, voluntarists, free market advocates. Anybody who wants to participate is welcome, so long as you are a fan of the non-aggression principle. So that's our big announcement. Sorry we didn't cover Bitcoin Cash, but before the invention of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, this sort of thing wouldn't have even been possible. So Bitcoin enabled this. This is the next step after Bitcoin. I think I have about 10 minutes left for questions. I imagine there's probably a few questions. Speak up, don't be shy, and visit freesociety.com for information. We have a white paper up there. Who has a question? I see lots of hands. Okay, so, and Lynn Ulbricht just right here in front. So Lynn gets to go first. Ross Ulbricht's mother, for those of you that don't know. So.
Something about extraditing political prisoners from the United States as a country. That's actually it.
Yep, so the question for those that couldn't hear, what about people being extradited from this land? So we were actually just talking about that earlier this morning, and we're not sure, to be honest. So I suppose if some other country wants to extradite somebody, they'll have to contract with one of the protection agencies in the land or to get them, or come and get them themselves, or...
I was thinking more of extraditing from the United States, somehow
Yeah.
someone from the United States.
So the question is, how would we extradite someone from the U.S.?
Well, it's just a little fantasy.
Yeah, I don't think I think the U.S. is the big bully, and I think they do whatever they want. And as much as I would love to help on that front, I'm not sure how we can help on that front at the moment. So, and this guy looks very, very eager with his hand up in the back.
Would the population be armed to the extent to be able to defend themselves against the existing sovereign government should a problem with the sovereign government arise?
So the question is, will the citizens, or not even citizens, the people living there be armed enough to defend themselves from the previous sovereign government that owned the land? Hopefully, we'll see. There's a whole lot of details that need to be worked out. But at the same time, even if we don't get everything absolutely perfect from day one, it's still probably going to be a heck of a lot better than any other country in the entire world at this point. So I think this guy in the back was even more good, but you're next. So. And so the question is, can we grow and research cannabis on this land? Probably not for export. A lot of it will depend on what sort of negotiations we're able to finalize with the country that we purchased the land from. Of course, any sane person that's heard of the non-aggression principle would have no problem with that whatsoever. But you know, the devil is always in the details. And again, a lot of it will depend on exactly what sort of agreement we can get from the existing country with the land that we purchase. And I promised you were next.
Yeah. Thank you. So what size land are we talking about, and what size society in numbers, just so I can grasp the concept?
So the question is, what size land, what size society, how many people, you know, how big of a place? The bigger the better, right? Is the answer. So a lot of that will depend on once the lawyers figure out exactly how we can allow the public to participate. $100 million is just the start, right? We would love to have $500 million, I don't think is out of the question. Maybe even $1 billion can be raised. And there's a lot of cryptocurrency millionaires out there that would and should love this project. So the more money we raise, the bigger a piece of land we can buy. And maybe we'll even do a couple of different pieces of land in different parts of the world and have a couple of competing areas as well. So the more places like this we can set up around the world, the better. And the more money we raise, the more we can do.
So no limit on geographical location?
Well, if the United States would sell us 100% of their land mass, then maybe we would do that. But
a short list of countries that are willing to?
Yeah, we definitely have a short list. We've actually already been talking to a number of countries. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the names of them right now, so I'm going to have to leave you in suspense on that front.
I meant to say, what are the names, not do you have a short list?
Yeah, those names will be coming in the future, but I can't tell you at the moment. I'm sorry. So, oh, nice to see you again.
I applaud your idea, great idea, and the execution I'm sure is going to be fine. One concern we might all have is what's to stop the governments that sell your land trying to seize it back when it becomes a sort of a powerful state with a very wealthy community. I mean, if there's history has shown that when the American government seizes gold, anything that's an asset which is not decentralized, and land cannot be decentralized by its very nature because it's a fixed and it's an immobile asset. What's to stop any government, even the government that didn't sell it to you, saying, we want this, we'll grab hold of it?
So his question is, what are we going to do about it once we build this into, the world's most prosperous, geographical area in the world, and the government that we bought the land or some other government nearby decides, hey, you built a lot of nice stuff, we want to take that. So David Friedman refers to that problem in his book, The Machinery of Freedom, as the hard problem. I think the hard problem has been solved. I don't necessarily feel incredibly comfortable talking about that solution in public at the moment, but if you Google that, there's information about that, and that ties back into one of the other questions, though, as well.
So what would determine what is the criteria you're saying then to be able to be allowed to live there? Like, in other words, how do we get in the pearly gates, so to speak?
So we're working out all the details again, and once again, this is not an ICO. But the idea at some point is to basically auction off the land. And then anybody that buys land can do whatever they want with it within the title restriction of the land. And again, the question was, how do you get to come there and be there? So, the free market is, I guess, the short answer. So.
Will there be taxes, and how will you pay for the services that are required to maintain the whole country, specifically if you had a migrant invasion?
So the question is, will there be taxes? Of course not. No, this society is based on the non-aggression principle. And what about the roads? Well, here's a pretty fancy piece of technology in my pocket, right? Governments didn't build this. This is a heck of it allows me to contact anyone anywhere on the planet for, I don't know, a couple pennies a day, depending on what my bill is, less than maybe $1 a day. I can contact anyone on the planet and communicate with them. That's a heck of a lot harder and more complicated to build than a flat spot on the ground. But granted, flat spots on the ground are important. But I think a nice way of looking at it will be just like, you have a big skyscraper building and you have an elevator shaft and all the tenants within the building contribute to maintain the elevator. It'll be the same way. All the property owners nearby, they want roads, they'll chip in voluntarily, and the free market will figure it out on the details. So no, there will be no taxation of any kind. There will be no central authority of any kind to impose that taxation. We're going to find out what a free society actually looks like and works like. And even if you're not a libertarian, even if you're not a voluntarist, even if you're a hardcore statist and you love government controlling everything, you should love and support our project. And the reason why you should love and support our project is because all of us crazy libertarians can go off to our little piece of land and we can fail miserably. And you state-loving, president-worshiping people out there can say, look at how bad they screwed everything up. Look, we need our government. So even if you think I'm a nutcase and voluntarists and libertarians are nuts, you should still support our project so you have something to point at as to how badly we failed. And I don't think we're going to fail. Yeah, the devil's always in the details. The more land we can get a hold of, the better in our book. And a lot of that will depend on exactly how much capital we come up with. But we have, over $100 million of private capital already committed to it. So that's a pretty good start. So, Joby.
Is there going to be any kind of vetting process besides I have $1 billion selling land, for people that want to, join? Or are we just going to say, well, communists can come and mass murderers can find exile here and safe haven here? We're going to stuff like that. Are we going to
So your question is, are we going to let you in, Joby? The devil is always in. The devil is always in the details. My initial gut reaction is that we probably wouldn't allow people to buy in if they have a bunch of money that was stolen from others. Texas. But again, we'll have to work out all of these, and there's still, this is in the early phases at this point, but we'll figure it out as we go here. So.
Will there be a way for people to participate in, who wants to live in this country, to suggest IDs and suggest criteria of allowing these people to come there?
I think you've just found a new business opportunity. So, and then the question for those that maybe can't hear because we're live streaming this, the question is are they going to issue IDs, and how what sort of services can we provide? And the answer is you can provide any service that's peaceful. Do whatever you want. If you want to issue IDs in the country and start a business, go ahead and do it, right? So. I'm sorry, you already had a question, so other people haven't had a question. I'm sorry.
So, I know the idea is for everything to be very peaceful, but do you have authority figures to enforce peacefulness?
You can hire whoever you want to help enforce it, and as long as it's peaceful, you're allowed to do whatever you want. So the general guide, and the question was, how do you keep the peace? And the answer to that is you don't keep the peace through threats of violence. And that's what we have in society today, is we have the peace being kept through giant, massive threats of violence. And if you do anything that disturbs the peace, we're going to hurt you, even if that thing that you want to do is something completely peaceful, like research with a plant. So anything that's peaceful will be allowed. And another fantastic book that maybe isn't that well known amongst libertarian circles is Anything That's Peaceful, by, I think, Leonard Reed, who's the author of I, Pencil. I think a lot of people may know the essay, I, Pencil. This is an entire book by him that I think he wrote in the 50s, which is a fantastic book. Are we doing okay for time? So, okay.
My schedule says you have until 12.
Oh, okay. I thought it was earlier than that. So, and I feel bad. Rather than me picking people at random in the audience, maybe we can have people line up down here. Is that all right with you?
We would need a
Terry?
microphone, and perhaps we can get.
We can have people line up right here, and you can come on the microphone. Yeah, come on down.
For short questions, no time for a presentation, a short question.
And if you have another question, you can line up right here, and that way I don't have to pick at random and make people feel like I'm ignoring them.
So how do you enforce the not peace?
How do you enforce the not peace? Yeah, so if you see something not peaceful happening, feel free to take action. Right? It's all of us, so. Yeah.
Roger, how much time do you think, realistically, it would be before we could actually move there? I mean, you're not holding your feet to the fire, but just what do you think?
So the question was, how long until we can actually start moving there and showing up?
Are we talking a year? Are we talking 10 years,
So
20 years?
all of us are getting older day by day, so no, I'm best case scenario, maybe within a year. Worst case scenario, within 5, I think, is where we're looking at. And realistically, maybe 2-ish is probably the right ballpark, so.
How can we help you build this?
Ooh, good question.
We are not having an ICO. So you cannot participate in our ICO. But we are exploring very carefully ways in which the public can participate. So keep an eye out for that. freesociety.com is the website. Follow us on Twitter. And if you want to get involved on the website, we have a contact form. We're looking for more people to help us, of course. So I look forward to having your help as well. So, thank you.
So essentially, you're dealing with governments currently to buy this land. Now, a lot of those governments have acquired their land through force. How do you resolve making sure that, in many cases currently, we use the term First Nations have owned that land prior, and the governments have acquired it from those First Nations. Now, if you're purchasing land from the government who had acquired it through force, are you having a method to resolve that?
Yeah, great question. My own personal opinion there is, for the most part, like, of course, what the United States government did to the Native Americans, absolutely horrible. I think the word for it is, mass murder. Absolutely horrible, but at the end of the day, the people that had that happen to them, they're all long dead and gone, and none of the people alive today were the ones that did that. So I'm not sure how we can go back and correct those past wrongs. for people that have an idea on how to correct that, I'm all ears.
I'm not trying to say correct it, I'm just trying to say resolve, we're buying, you're
Yeah.
buying something.
We'll do our best to buy land that has the cleanest blood-free title that we can possibly find, but there's not much of that anywhere in the world at this point, so, yeah.
I was just wondering if you had heard of the Ubuntu Liberation Movement with Michael Tellinger out of South Africa?
A little bit louder one more time, so.
I was just wondering if you had heard about the Ubuntu Liberation Movement out of South Africa with Michael Tellinger?
So I've heard of Ubuntu, and that's as far as I know. So maybe you could tell me a tiny bit more, and
Well, it's basically set up to where...
right into the microphone.
It's basically set up to where everyone contributes to community projects. So every week, if you have, a town of 1,000 people, for 3 hours a day, you have 3,000 man-hours at the end of the week getting done towards community projects in exchange for free energy technology, which is what he's working on. So he wrote a book called the Ubuntu Liberation Movement, but it moves us collectively towards a cashless society, not needing money because we've built a sustainable economy by everyone contributing. It'd be a really cool thing to implement in your town.
I'll read more about that. Thank you so much for that. So.
Super all for free market and also for inclusion. Are there thoughts about how to create this economy, that create the community so that there's a lot of people involved and it's not just rich white folks?
Yeah. So the more people that participate, the better. And if you have some ideas, we would love to help. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one coming up?
All right, so have you heard of seasteading, and how are you going to work with us?
Of course I've heard of seasteading. I've been a giant fan of seasteading for decades now. A lot of people don't know this. One of the big driving forces behind seasteading was Patrick Friedman. You might recognize that last name. He's the grandson of Milton Friedman, son of David Friedman. Read all of these guys. They really, really are sharp thinkers. So, of course, I'd love to work with you guys. Maybe you can start seasteading right off the coast of whatever land we wind up with. So I'd love to communicate with that.
Great.
So.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Please,
Roger, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Terry.